Iman, I think I'm starting to sense that you're starting to miss me because you haven't seen me in a while. We haven't done an in-person session in a while.
I never miss you. Staying on Zoom, I'm happy enough as it is. No, in reality, I do miss you. Yeah, we need to get some in-person sessions going soon.
It's the plan later this year. So today's guest is someone who I can say we have some, of course, he's a lot more senior than I am with a ton more experience, but you can say similarities in our backgrounds. Very, very inspiring. Also an Iranian immigrant. And I'll give a quick overview of the background. So Amir Nooriala kicked off his career at Cisco in the West Coast, I believe, and then Accenture over in London, Barclays, BGC, and then switched over to becoming an operating exec in tech. So joined OakNorth, held a chief strategy officer, chief operating officer roles there, and now at Callsign. So ton of experience, I'm sure a wealth of knowledge you can share with us. Amir, welcome to the show.
Thank you, and that is the most polite way I've ever heard of someone telling me I'm old. So I appreciate that. I'm going to say that from now on. I'm going to say this is my dad who has a lot more experience than me. I like that. That's good.
It's the subtle. To be honest, I'd say you're probably like the fifth or fourth oldest guest we ever had on, so we consider you among the youth.
Top quartile.
So Amir, like, just if you don't mind, we've got a lot to get through, but if you can give us a quick overview, because one thing that I really love about your background is when you were a kid, you won a place, a government assisted place at University College School, which is one of the sort of top boys' private schools in London, in Hampstead, which then kind of kick-started everything. If you give us a quick, and we'll get onto that stuff as well later on about sort of the things I'm passionate about, but what led to you going down this path?
So I wasn't expecting that one. Okay, so it's a bit of a strange one. So I went to my local state primary school, and I remember I was in the playground and I asked my friends, what school are you going to, what you school? And I was expecting everyone to say the same state secondary school that my older brother went to and all that. And they were all saying, oh, someone said, yeah, I'm going there. And then my best friend was like, no, I'm going to this other school, or I'm going to try to go to this other school. So I went home that night and I said to my mum, can I go to that school? And she kind of laughed at me and said, no, that's a private school. And I didn't know what private schools were. And I was like, well, what do you mean? What does that mean? She said, well, we can't afford it. You have to pay for that school. And I don't remember this bit, but my mum tells me about a week later, I came back to her and I said, how much do you have to pay to do the exam? And my mum said, yeah, there's not much for the exam. And then I went away and I came back again to my mum and I said, well, can you just pay for me to do the exam so I can see if I was smart enough to get in? And so my mum said, fine, but I want to be very clear, we can't afford to go to this school. So she paid for the exam. I went and did the exam. It was like 3 different papers, and then there was an interview with the headmaster. And as soon as that was done, my mum said, right, let's go. So we walked out. We were walking into the car park, and the headmaster ran after my mum and said, where are you going? And my mum was like, well, we can't afford to go. We just want to do the exam. And the headmaster said, well, why don't we do a scholarship then? And that's how I ended up in the school. So it's a complete fluke. I don't remember actually telling my mum, can I do this sort of stuff? But she swears that's what happened and it wasn't her idea. So that's what happened, and it changed everything. It absolutely changed everything, because when you're surrounded by people who look like you and are not as smart as you, or are as smart as you, and same with sporting or same with social ability, you look at them and you go, you're not better than me, and you see the ambition they have, you just think, well, I should have the same ambition. And I think that is the biggest issue we have with social mobility is, if someone's from a single parent family and no one in their family's been to university or no one's got a white collar job, it's not that they can't do it. They don't even know it's possible. And that's the thing we need to break, is that barrier of possibility for people, because the potential's there, but the ambition doesn't match it because they just don't know what you can do. So I don't know if that's answering your question, but that's how I got there.
That is quite inspiring. And there is a lot of, you hear the stories in the press about kids who've made it from those environments. But unfortunately, the reason you hear about those stories is because they're novel. And so you don't actually, these things are not actually that common in society, which is a shame. And we'll come on to social mobility, making the leap, etc., towards the end of this podcast. But fast forward, you go through this process, you get into a top school, you then end up in Cisco, Accenture, Barclays, big names, and then you make the jump to an operating exec at OakNorth and Callsign. Can you just walk us through that process?
Okay, I mean, there's going to be a theme here of there's a lot of luck and not that much planning. So, you said my parents are Iranian immigrants. So when it came to picking a subject, I wanted a subject that I was going to get a well-paid job out of it. And my brother was older. He'd already moved to Silicon Valley. He's 8 years older than me. So he was there proper .com boom. And he's like, it's all about tech. You need to get into tech. That's the thing you want to get into. And I wanted to do economics. He's like, no, it's all about tech. So I signed up for computer science at uni at 97. Did my degree. And literally my final year degree, before I finished it, I was able to sign a contract with Cisco. They were going to relocate me to America. And I ended up in Silicon Valley. The problem was I took 6 months out between uni and the job. And a crash happened during that time. Because I thought to myself, I can have 6 months of fun in London, right? I've graduated, all the rest of it. And the problem I had was all my friends were still students, so they didn't have any money. I didn't have any money, so I couldn't actually go out and have fun. And then the crash is happening at the same time. So all the shares they'd given me on signing were completely underwater and useless, these options. But, it was an incredible experience. It's 4 years out there. A bit like it is now, actually. Right now, when I look at what's happening in San Francisco with rents going down, that's what it was like for me. My rent went down every single year I was there. My friends would leave every year. Everyone's saying the city's dead. Everyone's leaving. It's exactly what you hear right now about San Francisco and this whole everyone's going to Austin or Miami or wherever the tech scene's going to end up in America. So I went through that. Great learning experience. And my girlfriend, who I'd met at university, who put up with me long distance, said, no, it's time to come back. And I was like, you're right, it's time to come back. So I came back. We are married, 3 kids. So it was the right decision. But Cisco weren't going to move me. It wasn't a good economy. Tech wasn't doing well in the UK. So Accenture were willing to move me. Accenture moved me over to London. I joined them. My boss went to Barclays. So I went with him to Barclays and went in-house from consulting. I did a long stint, 11 years there. During that time, I really wanted to get into startups because I was in Silicon Valley and I'd experienced it. And I was like, you know what, I really miss those kind of entrepreneurial days. So first thing I did was I was looking for jobs in the tech sector. And I've saved this thing in LinkedIn. I've got one job application where I've applied in LinkedIn. And I looked it up before this podcast, actually. I wrote it down. On the 10th of July, 2011, so nearly 10 years ago, I applied to be the COO of Nutmeg, who were one of the first fintechs, right? Proper fintech. And I was lucky enough. I got an interview. There were about 5 people. They were in this Muse garage in Clapham. I went down there. I think it was called Nick Hungerford, the CEO. He took me to a greasy spoon. I had like a sausage and egg bap. And he basically spent the interview telling me how he got all these amazing candidates and I wasn't going to get the job. But I went home to my wife and I was like, I'd really like to get back in that tech sector. I miss it. And I've always saved that LinkedIn post as inspiration. I'm going to get back into it. So a couple of years later, I tried to do my own e-commerce business, did that for about 5 years on the side while I was working at Barclays. And that didn't quite come off, so I sold that off. And then I'd kind of given up. I was a managing director, team of 300, earning good money, but I always wanted to go there, but I'd given up. I thought, I'm too late. I'm too senior. It's never going to happen. And then on LinkedIn, a recruiter contacted me and said, would you like to join Europe's top fintech? And I was like, brilliant. This is it. Monzo, Revolut, I'm in. And they're like, no, it's OakNorth. And I was like, I've never heard of OakNorth. I've never heard of these guys. And then they were like, it's to be the CIO. And I thought to myself, I don't know how much you know about banking technology. When you get to a senior level, you're not technical anymore. You're just managing people. So I'd lost all technical abilities. I think I can't be CIO. So I said, no, I'm not interested. And they kept persisting. And they were like, why don't you want to be CIO? And I said, well, I'm running ops and tech at Barclays. I don't want to be doing just tech. And finally, they came back to me and said, what about being COO, run tech and ops for OakNorth? So I did my research and I was like, this company sounds amazing. I did some due diligence. And actually, there was the chairman of OakNorth Bank, still to this day, is an Iranian guy, Cyrus and Iman, who was the vice chairman at Barclays. So I'd met him through Barclays. And so I did my due diligence and I was like, this is a real thing. This is a proper fintech. It's a unicorn. This is the real deal. So took the jump, joined them. Soon after that, we did Series B, we did SoftBank, all the rest of it. And now doing a similar thing, similar journey at Callsign. So I would like to say it was skill, it was planned. I can't take credit, I'll be honest with you.
Yeah, I think when you joined OakNorth, it was Europe's most valuable fintech at the time. Am I right?
It wasn't. Then it became it after SoftBank.
Then it became okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then after OakNorth, you then joined Callsign, where you are now.
Yeah.
And Callsign have raised a total of roughly 38 million, 35 of which was a recent Series A led by Accel in 2017.
Yeah, and if you Google us, there's a rumours articles about this Series B. I can't confirm or deny them, but what I would say is we're a publicity shy company. We don't actually like to do PR or talk about these things, but we've just gone through a very similar journey that I had at OakNorth. It's just we haven't announced it. Okay.
So what does Callsign do? Why did you join, and what does your day-to-day entail?
Sure. So Callsign is a digital identity company. And by digital identity, I mean, it's a very specific part of it. It's called authentication. And it's something most people would never think about until COVID happened. So what authentication is about is proving that the person who's logging in to an account, and it could be a bank, it could be a merchant, it could be government, anything, but let's use the bank example. The person logging into the account is the person who owns that account, but proving it from a pure digital essence. So it's not about government IDs or your face or anything like that. It's actually saying there is enough tech now that you can tell someone is who they are without them having to do anything. And I use an example for you. When you log into something with an email and a password and you create that account, they ask you to write that email address twice. The companies we work with, we ask them to type it 3 times. Because when you're typing, we're actually building a behavioral model for how you type. So let's use my name and a UK keyboard. I would do Amir Nooriala and then an @ sign. And the @ sign for me is the shift, right thumb, right index on the and key, and then I'll do, let's say, callsign.com. And the way I type it has a cadence, right? There are certain words I do in a pattern, then there's a little break and a pattern. I'll do the special characters in a certain way. And it's subconscious, it's muscle memory. And what we've proven scientifically, as well as with the regulator, is that it's an incredibly accurate way of identifying someone, a bit like your walking gait. It's something that can't be copied, but is incredibly repeatable and accurate. So that's one of the things we do. We do a device fingerprint where we can actually identify a device no matter what you do it with software. So you can clear your cache of cookies, you can go incognito in a VPN. We can still tell it's your machine. And so what that means is you know your username and password. That's called a knowledge factor. That's one factor authentication. We've proven you are who you say you are. In regulatory terms, that's called inherence factor. And we've proven it's your machine that you open the account with. So that's possession factor. So we make a simple login with knowledge, 1 factor. We make it into 3-factor authentication. And the reason why I say COVID has made this now the most important thing is if you are picking your bank or you're picking your shop now, you don't pick it by what's the nearest. You don't go, where's my nearest branch or where's my nearest pharmacy? You're actually going, who's got the best experience? I want the best. And that experience is what's the easiest to log in? What's the easiest to check out and pay? Whether it's sending a payment or checking out a shopping cart. And easy means less friction. And everything I described to you is frictionless, it's passive. So when I joined the company in January last year, part of my remit was you need to raise, obviously, our brand awareness, but you need to talk about this topic. Go around the world and just talk about this topic and make people realize they need to think about it. And then COVID happened and physical traffic dried up and all fraud went online as well. And suddenly I've gone from having to make people aware of it to saying, whoa, we have way too much demand. And so when I joined in January, we were 110 people. We're now 343 people, just to give you an example in 13 months, the growth we've gone through. So It keeps me busy. It's all about, we've gone from startup to scale up to rapidly into blitz scale. So it's very much about how do you scale an organization just in the territories they're in and keep the quality up, then expand the territories, expand the verticals, and it's end to end as well. So it's not just about the sales function, it's about the technical sales, it's about the post sales, the customer success, your integration functions, how do you get your documentation up to the standard, your call center, all that sort of stuff. It's proper kind of blitz scale, super interesting work. So every day is different. I spend my mornings with Asian clients, Middle Eastern clients, daytime Europe, and then, after I finish this, I'll be on North American clients. So yeah, I'm really, really enjoying it.
It must be a change of pace from the previous roles you've had in corporate world, right? In the sense that it might be the same amount of work, but it's a different type of work. Talk to us a bit about some of the practices, frameworks, mental models you've used and how you've kind of shifted what you've done, or how you shifted what you've done from sort of corporate world to startup world.
Sure. So you couldn't be more accurate, right? The workload is the same. When you work in a bank, when you work in a law firm, when you work in a consultancy, you work hard. No one should ever say to you, you don't work hard. You work really, really hard. The difference is you might not enjoy it like you do when you work in a startup. When you work in a bank, it's not necessarily about growth at the moment. It's about reducing costs, consolidating systems, that kind of thing. While in a startup, the conversation is about how do we grow and not break things. So depending on your personality, for me, I prefer the latter. That's far more interesting. So you're spot on. The workload doesn't drop. For me, the topics become more interesting. But if I hadn't gone through what I went through, I couldn't do this job. If they'd hired me in my 20s, I wouldn't have been able to do this job. I'm not saying people shouldn't move over, but I couldn't have done an operating executive job if I hadn't seen what good and what excellent looks like, and the level of rigor and process you need around it. Especially in a regulatory environment, when you're selling to banks, you have to be understanding the standards they have to have any chance of being able to sell to a tier one financial institution. So there's a lot of learning I've taken from that previous experience that I've applied. But at the same time, I need to realize I'm working in a far smaller organization. You don't have 2 or 3 people who can do that job. You have one person who does 4 jobs. And so it becomes about prioritization. It becomes about breaking things down into tasks and knowing what order you need to do them in and what can wait and what can't and what are dependencies. Banks are such good grounding for just understanding complex problems. So in terms of kind of techniques or things like that, the techniques I've learned are the classic skill sets you would learn in a bank in terms of how do you matrix manage, how do you map out an incredibly complex program where you've got internal and external dependencies with a date set by a client and be able to meet that date. How do you articulate something to a senior person who doesn't necessarily have the content or the time or attention span, that kind of thing. So there's a lot I've learned. There's a lot I've had to kind of remove and think, no, we have to be really nimble. We haven't got the staff. We haven't got the budget. That side of it as well. So for me personally, I can't envision me going as a graduate into a startup and going to an operating executive because I need to learn on the job. I'm not one of those people who learns from a book. I'm far better learning on the job. So for me, that was the right path. Other people might be able to go to a class, get an MBA, learn the theory, and then apply it and be able to make that transition. For me, that doesn't work. So I've come in a bit later, but it worked for me.
It's interesting you say corporate world is boring.
I'm not saying it's boring. I'm saying it depends on your personality and what you prefer. Yeah. Some people like stability, and they like having the repetition of a comfortable task they've done before.
True.
I want the chaos.
Yeah, likewise. I mean, I think there's nothing in the world more boring than corporate. And I've been telling Iman, so as you know, I did banking for a few years. Iman's in strategy consulting, but he's got the startup itch, so I'm sure you can maybe have a chat with him after. So look, I mean, ultimately a large part of your job, I'm assuming, is hiring as well. Yep. And as a lot of the Silicon Valley sort of giants and Keith Rabois and a lot of other people say, the team you build is the company you build. It's not so much even about the product, it's actually about the team, because they build the product. So what are some practices or top tips that you've developed over the years that you can share with us about your hiring practices and the subsequent management of those team members?
Yeah, so I think the first thing is you need to know what stage of the company you're hiring for. The people you hire when you're 10, 20 are very different to 100 or even 1,000. There's that transition you go through from generalist to specialist. In the early stage, you need people who are willing to be okay at lots of things, and are comfortable with that. And every week they're going to be given something new or sent somewhere else. Well, when you get to a certain point, and it's generally scale up and maybe a bit more mature kind of scale up, that you have to have specialists. You need to start bringing in world-class people who've done it before, unfortunately. So there is that transition in terms of hiring. I think what COVID has really shown me is when you can't hire people without actually seeing them, you need to put a lot of effort into the non-professional skills in your hiring practices, because you're not going to be seeing them, you're not going to be hearing them on the phone talking to someone because you're sitting near them or whatever else. It's not just you interview them and you can't see them in person. You're not going to feel them or by secondary effects see how they're doing. So you really need to put a lot of diligence into the soft skill side of it. So we've introduced things like social interviews on Zoom, where if there's not technical questions or whatever else, once the candidate has passed all of the technical type interviews, we then have a kind of a group Zoom, and it's just a social one. It's generally after our work hours, and just talk about life as you would if you were in a social setting like a pub or a cafe or whatever else. It's trying to recreate that side of it, because if they suddenly come across as awkward or do anything wrong there, they might be doing that with a client as well. So it's how do we get that part out of it? We're putting a lot more effort into references than I'm not saying we didn't do references, but I find they're really, really important now again, because you don't even know how someone dresses. You don't know if they're wearing any pants or not. You have no idea, right? So you want people to say, yes, I've worked with them for a year or two and they're completely fine and they'll fit in, that kind of it. And then in terms of backgrounds, I think we're getting a clear background in terms of what we need. When I was at OakNorth, the hiring, you could be a bit more generalist in terms of the backgrounds. You just wanted someone really smart and hungry. In Callsign, because authentication is a bit more of a niche, depending on the role, sometimes we insist they have to have a little bit of exposure to this field. While at OakNorth, we didn't really mind. The guy had this kind of consultancy experience, or they've worked in this kind of field, or this kind of startup. They're all high caliber and they had a good role. They're going to transfer. So depending on the domain of your business, you might need some domain knowledge as well. But for a lot of startups, that's not important. We're just a little bit niche in terms of what we do. So yeah, so I would say in terms of tips, it's really, really figure out the non-core skills element of it. I've got a list of kind of random questions I like to ask candidates to kind of get a feel for what they're like. Things, and they're generally things where I try to get something negative out of them. When you ask people that question, what's your weakness? Everyone is so polished now where they give you this weakness where it's not a weakness. What's your weakness? And you go like, sometimes I just work too hard and I forget to take a break. That's not a weakness. What are you talking about? That's utter crap. So I prefer to ask questions like, have you ever lost a friend and why? Or have you ever blamed someone else for your mistake? Just things like that, which are similar theme. You want to see if they open up and how they talk about it, but not giving them the opportunity to give you a polished answer. So that would be my kind of tips on it.
How do you then take that narrative, that sort of that element of culture that's embedded in the way you hire people, and embed that in the business long term, both in a COVID and non-COVID environment, right? Because you obviously want a meritocracy in startup world, which maybe you don't get in corporate world. But like, how do you build that culture then? How does that emanate into the rest of the business life?
I'm a firm believer in full transparency. you cannot scale a startup if people are not empowered to make decisions by themselves. But how can people be expected to make the right decision if they don't have the full breadth of facts around what's happening? And it could be facts that have nothing to do with their role or even their department. But 3 conversations down the line, something might be triggered and they'll remember something else is happening and they'll bring it together and lead to a better outcome. So for me, it's all about transparency. So I like to tell everyone, other than kind of confidential investor stuff, everything that is happening in the business, I want everyone to know. And I'm going to overshare, and I'm going to probably forget I've told you once, and I'm going to tell you 3 times as well, just to make sure you're aware of it. And then I need you to do the same for me as well. Because the more senior you get, your job actually is to stitch it together. So I need to know what's happening, not because I want to micromanage you. That's the last thing I want to do is micromanage anyone. I've got time for that. But I do want to know what's happening. I want to know the kind of conversations and who said, and why did they say that? What was it? Because the more facts you have, the better chance you have of just getting it right. So for me, it's all about transparency of communication and over communication. Both of those things at all times. But like I said, if you're in a startup, you do have to put a little bit aside, and that's the kind of the confidential investor stuff.
Yeah, awesome. So moving on from, say, company building, let's get a bit more specific. Starting with fintech, can you tell us a little bit more about Fintech North London? Because I know it's something that you're involved with.
Sure. So it's a bit of a weird one. So Fintech North London is a group that I run with a friend of mine, Devin Coley. So Dev is the co-COO and founder of Outward VC. So they're a kind of a Series A, Series B fintech VC. So what happened was two things happened in parallel. One was when I was working at OakNorth, Rishi, the founder CEO there, said to me, I want you to kind of be the face of the company and take over a lot of the external and also the relationships with certain communities like the fintech community or trade bodies like Tech Nation or whatever else, that side of it. And I said to him, but Rishi, the problem with that is I'm not a founder, and founders only talk to founders. It's just they just don't trust people who haven't been through the experience they've been through. I'm not saying it's wrong. I agree with it. No one can really understand what it's like if they haven't done it. I get it, but it also means they're not going to talk to me, Rishi. So what? And Rishi was like, well, figure it out. That's what your job is. So, so I had that problem to solve. So how am I gonna make myself the face of the company? With the press and stuff is easy. We had Val, incredible at PR. She would help with that side of it. But how do I personally build relationships with these people who don't want to build a relationship with me? And then at the same time, I'd moved into this strategy role, and I had certain problems to solve. And one of them was, go and lower the cost of our deposits. Figure out how to lower the cost of our deposits. And so I came up with the idea of let's do a partnership with Monzo, and they'll give us their deposits, and we'll lend it out. We'll give them, fees for that kind of thing. And so I was coming up with these ideas and meeting all these people. And every meeting I'd go to, someone would go, oh, you know what? There's this guy. He spoke to me about the same topic as well. And it happened about the third time. And I said to the person, who is this guy? Everyone keeps talking to my people before I do. Who is this guy? And so they say, oh, you should go speak to Dev. So I emailed Dev. I said, Dev, mate, I don't know who you are. I hear your name all the time. And it's really starting to annoy me. We should meet up. So he invited me to his office. It was really nice. Got me a coffee. We sat there, had a drink, had a chat. And it turned out we lived around the corner from each other. And then we started complaining about the fact that in London and in the UK, a lot of tech scene is in East London. So it's around that kind of Shoreditch area. And we live in North London. And we're like, why don't we do a North London thing? To say we don't buy into that East London thing. We kind of said it as a joke. And so we met up at my house. We invited 2 other people we knew lived around the corner. And we put a post saying, North London FinTech, first meetup. And then the next day I had a bunch of founders contact me who I've been trying to establish relationships with, saying, why was I not invited? I live in North London. And so I spoke to Dev and I said, actually, you know what? Maybe this is a thing. Maybe this is a way that we can, he's always looking for deal flow. He's a VC. And I'm always looking to expand the network and see what I can do for my company through the network that I make. Why don't we make this into a thing? So we invited the people who reached out. We had about 9 people at my house the next time, posted it on LinkedIn, and suddenly we had like 25 people say, why am I not invited? And I think the fourth or fifth time we posted it, we had 168 people contact us after that one saying, can I join? So at that point, we're like, all right, we're going to stop talking about this. And we're really, really good, high caliber people who've made it. You've got, Ricky from Tandem reached out, Shahar from Curve, Viraj from Pocket, Simon from Chip. They're really good fintech people reached out. And we've kept in touch. I even sent an email to them actually a couple of days ago saying just checking in, if everyone's okay, that kind of thing. And it's a really good group. We angel invest together. We mentor businesses together. It's worked out really, really well. So it was like every question you asked me, the answer is it wasn't necessarily planned or what I expected, but it's turned out something that's just helped me career and friendship wise. And it's something I'd recommend everyone do is if you're thinking about brand building or networking or how you can get out there, just be creative and don't be afraid to just try something. And before you know it, that idea is going to become real. If you say it enough times, it will become real.
It's serendipity, isn't it? It's basically just putting yourself out there and shit just happens as a result. Well,
look at you two, right? And what you're doing right now, right? I'm sure you didn't think this is day one, what we're going to do day two. Let's try it out. Let's see what happens. And it's happening, right?
We've now got A1 guests coming on like yourself. So yeah, it's happening. All right, let's switch gears a bit on that because you mentioned a couple important things there. You talked about Dev being in the GP at Outward and meeting a whole bunch of people in the fintech space as a result of the serendipity element.
Yeah.
What are you most bullish on in fintech then? If you're meeting all these people and seeing this whole stuff going on, what's the big play? What's the next big play?
Well, look, I'm a firm disciple of the bundle unbundle cycle that happens. I'm a massive believer. I've always believed in that. I remember seeing Mary Meeker's slides when I was back in Silicon Valley, and she had this famous slide where she would show like the yellow pages and say, like, you wanted a plumber, you wanted this, you wanted that. You'd go to the yellow pages. That was your directory. And then here's Craigslist. And she would show like Craigslist, you've got jobs, you've got holiday rentals, you've got, whatever you want. It's all in one place, and that's the bundle. And they've got the market. And then the unbundle happens. And she'd circle it on the slide. So this holiday rentals, that's Airbnb. And this one's Expedia. And this one's Monster, but now it's LinkedIn. And then she would show peak revenue Craigslist, 1 billion a year. Airbnb now valued at 16, this one 20. So there's that kind of bundle cycle. So what I think is happened and is happening in fintech is we saw an unbundle of the bank. So the fintechs came in and they chipped away. And they said, right, I'm going to be like a prepaid card, and then I'm going to be a current account, and I'm going to be a niche lender, and I'm going to be this, and I'm going to be that. And so I think, and I've been saying it for a couple of years now. Originally, about 2-3 years ago, if you said to me, I said, there's too many people now. There's too much unbundle. There's going to be consolidation of who's unbundled. But I think now we're going to see the rebundle, where it's not, we're going to go from 5 people doing one thing, the same thing, becoming one person in the same thing. We're going to see 3 people doing different things joining together. I don't know if we're going to get to that Chinese super app necessarily in Europe or in the US, but we're going to get a movement towards it. So for me, I'm very much bullish on anything that's going to rebundle. I mentioned kind of Shahar and Curve, that kind of OTT, that over the top type thing he's been talking about for a very long time now. In fintech terms, like 7 years he's been going on about it. But we are seeing that now, right? That anything that can bundle is what people want. People don't want to have 100 different apps on their phone just for their finances. They don't want to have 15 just for the current account and just for FX and just that. People want to consolidate now. The novelty's worn off and they want ease. So I'm bullish on anything that does that. And then the other side of it is I think there's going to be a massive movement to B2B. I think D2C's had its time. It was the cool, sexy thing. People have seen some parts of it just aren't monetizable, while other bits are. While B2B is always the pipes, and the pipes are always monetizable, and they're monetizable from day one, to be honest.
Yeah. So it was around 6 years ago from now, actually 6 years ago, I was interviewing for a tech banking role, and one of the senior MDs, who's a great guy, he said to me, what technology excites you? And this is early 2015. And I said to him, fintech. And he said, why? And I said, I gave many reasons, but in a nutshell, it was because eventually they're going to take over. And over the years, and he said, surely not. I still don't know why he decided to hire me after me saying that at the time, because a lot of people were skeptical. Over the last 6 years, we've seen insane development of neobanks and open banking APIs, especially following the introduction of PSD2. So do you think these technologies are a threat or somewhat a future replacement in the long distance future to the high street traditional banking models? And what sort of advantages or challenges are you seeing here to get to mass adoption?
I don't know if you'd call it a contrarian view, but I don't think the high street banks are threatened. I think the reality of it is, if you boil it down to what is the purpose of a bank? A bank's purpose is to safeguard your money. And do you trust, regardless of do you like your bank or you think the customer service is good, whatever, do you trust your bank to safeguard your money? I would like to meet someone who says no, right? Everyone is going to agree on that one fact. And if you then ask that question of, do you trust Facebook or Google to trust your money? The answer is going to be no, I don't trust them. And then the next question is, well, do you trust the fintechs, even if they have FSCS protection? Do you trust them? And people will say, well, I'm willing to invest in them as a speculative exercise, to make money. I'm not sure I put my salary in there. And that's the reality of it. So it's going to be very, very hard to break that inertia of there is just trust and they are the custodians of our money. So that's kind of the base contrarian kind of argument I'm going to put out there. In terms of kind of the fintechs, are they going to disrupt? Yeah, they'll absolutely continue to disrupt. And then they have a choice. They have to dominate, get a big market share, and then expand and eventually become something that looks like a bank. Or they're going to have to be bought, or someone's going to just copy them and they're going to disappear. But I just don't see you just doing that one thing forever. You have to expand. And if you look at any business that like Google or whatever, they start with one thing, they dominate it, and then they expand. And so I think fintechs who are thinking, I'm just going to be this niche, you're not a business then at that point. You're not even a product, you're a feature. And once you've got that really good feature, quickly make it into a product, make that product into a business, and then expand that business. I think we will see some new fintechs. I think they're going to be increasingly niche because the mainstream is being done. And there'll be more and more niche sectors of I do just insurance for this, or I just do banking for that, or lending for that one, that kind of thing. I'm a judge for Tech Nation for their fintech stream. And if you look at the entrants from this year, there's some really cool ones. If you look at insurance ones, but they're very, very specific. Like we just do mobile phone coverage, but we've got a better way of pricing insurance policies for mobile phones. So that's very niche. And I'm sure that's actually a business, that one, I can't remember his name, but I'd back them. But I don't think they can do that forever. They need to find another one, and keep expanding, or just be bought by someone and have a parent protecting them. So I don't think the banks are going to get displaced. If you look at PSD2, you've asked another question there with open banking. I'm a huge, huge fan of open banking, but I see it as a pipe, right? It's opening something up, and now it's about what you do with it. And there are some really cool businesses I've seen coming out of it. And again, you can make money just being the pipe, in the gold rush, being the guy who sells the shovel stuff. You can be that kind of pipe side of open banking. But then there's some really cool stuff out there you can do as well. But I don't think they're necessarily going to disrupt. They're going to be a niche business that's going to have to take hold, do well, and then continue to expand. Because the banks can just copy it anyway. The banks are already making their data available to open banking. It's not hard for them to aggregate everyone else's data in the same way and just replicate. And we've already seen that on the FX space with, for instance, Santander and Pago FX. It really isn't that hard.
This talks back to your thread of the bundling market, right?
Yeah.
But I guess what you could challenge it with is, well, the cost to serve of these banks is so high that the niche suppliers, the people that are the niche problem solvers, if you will, they're doing something that the banks just can't do fast enough. The banks then can consolidate them or purchase them or whatever it is, and you build that feature on top of the bundled product.
Yeah. And look, the banks are definitely running with a higher operating cost, but they also have a huge cash pile that they don't pay any interest on, that they could use to lend out. And if you look at most lending businesses in the fintech space, the reason why they fail isn't because they've got a bad idea or the niche isn't real. It's because of their cost of funds are too high. Because they're having to go to the wholesale market and get a loan at Goldman at 9% and then figure out a market they could lend to at way over 9%. Unless you're Wonga, you're going to struggle to get over 9%, especially if it's, and then if they are getting more than that, it's unsecured. And then there's massive risk there. So you can't really ever argue with the fact that banks just have billions of pounds of cash where they don't pay interest on, and they can use that to do low margin lending that wouldn't be feasible for a fintech and use that to generate revenue. And then with that revenue, they can just copy everyone else's features.
And what about, I have to ask you, but what about blockchain's ability to disrupt this market, right? Because we talked about digital identity on the one hand, and you've got this whole fintech revolution happening on the other. Smart contracts, you've got the Ethereum blockchain and all of that stuff. That kind of brings all of this together. Is it a viable, number one, is it a viable currency? And number two, is it really going to challenge these big banks if they have this much scope and power already?
I'm a contrarian on that one. Look, I see it as a pipe, right? I'm not going to talk about the currency side of it, right? I'm not going to talk about Bitcoin or Dogecoin or whatever else you might have bought after reading Wall Street Bets. The technology is itself, absolutely. It can be a game changer, just like new materials can build lighter cars or better spaceship. It's a game, absolutely. It is a game changer. And we're seeing concepts coming out of it, in terms of different ways of looking at ledgers or smart contracts or just supply chain and the way you track things end to end. But it's all about the use case. And why the bank can do the exact same thing. Someone needs to come up with an idea as a fintech that leverages it, that's groundbreaking, that makes them money, and they need to expand very quickly and get market share and then keep expanding. Otherwise, a bank will just copy them, or Facebook will copy them, or Google will copy them. So yes, it's disruptive, but I don't think Bitcoin is going to go and take away physical currency or credit cards or anything else. No, I don't think so. We need a better use case than that.
Okay. So I want to move on to a topic that you're very passionate about and I'm very passionate about, which is social mobility.
Okay.
So me and Iman, we recently set up Minority in Tech. So for anyone who wants to check it out, minorityN.tech. It's a private community, as the name suggests, for extraordinary minorities in UK tech, founders, operators, investors, etc. You've been a lot more involved in this space, and you've often shared your views. Given your background of getting into university, college, school, with the story you explained earlier, and how it shaped your sort of worldview, opportunities it opened up, you're now involved with Making the Leap. Can you touch on that and just generally other work you've been doing in this space?
Sure. Because of what I went through, it's a topic I've been very, very passionate about. And so Barclays actually offered a scheme that when you got to, I think it was director level, they would match you up with an executive charity headhunter, and you'd say what your interests were, and they would find a charity in your interest space that's looking for a trustee. And the way the Barclays saw it was that this was a good experience to get to board positions. So they saw it as a win-win for them. You'll be happy, they'll be happy, and everyone gains from it. And so I kind of came up with my topics, introduced me to Making the Leap, West London charity looking at young adults who have decent academic grades, but they're generally the first person in their family to do so. They don't have any role models, and the charity's goal is to get people their first kind of white-collar job. I've spent time with them. It's opened my eyes to a lot. I mean, it was surprising to me how many kids who've got good grades at A-level do not know how to shake a hand, do not know how to dress, do not know how to talk on the phone, do not know to look you in the eye when they meet you. And so the charity is very lucky. It was given a building early on by the council. And so they use it to run training classes, like 2 or 3 week workshops, which are now on Zoom. And they would literally start at the basics of, this is how you should dress. It doesn't matter that you don't dress like that. You're going into an environment where everyone else is dressing that way. You need to make them feel comfortable as well. So you should try and, dress like everyone else dresses. And in this custom, you might not like handshakes. You might think old people do handshakes. But in the business environment, everyone shakes hands. Everyone says, how are you? Everyone looks in the eye, that kind of thing. And then we literally would sit down and teach them how to write a CV, how to do a phone interview. So it's basically saying, you're smart enough. You've got all the raw skills, but no one has ever shown you how to operate in the adult professional world. And if we can just take a couple of weeks of your time and do this, you can get your job, your first professional job. And it's incredible when you see someone who has no confidence, and they generally have no confidence as well, because they don't think anything is possible. They've never seen anyone in their estate achieve anything and get this kind of job. And it's amazing when you see someone go through this and get a graduate entry-level job in a FTSE, whatever firm, and they feel like they've become CEO because the impact that is going to have on them and their family and, the extended family and their friends and everyone. It's something I think everyone should try and do. If you're in a position of privilege, and by privilege, I don't mean necessarily money. If you're in a position of privilege where you had a mentor, you had someone who showed you what's possible and you've achieved something, if you give back, it's incredibly uplifting and rewarding, and it's our duty as well. Because I think, especially if you look at right now and the unrest that's going on around the world, a lot of that unrest is because people just don't think that they can work hard and achieve things. They just don't think that they have access to that opportunity. And when people don't care because they don't think I can achieve anything anyway, so why should I bother? When people don't care, that's when you get unrest. And I've been saying this for a while. And while I've been saying this, we've seen what's happening in America and everywhere, the protests all over the place. People are just not happy. And it's not necessarily just about lockdown. They feel like they're missing out on life, they're missing out on opportunities, and when they come back, what kind of world are they going to get? We need to show people you can break that. And we talk about glass ceilings for women and stuff like that. We need to talk about just young adults from disadvantaged backgrounds, socioeconomically disadvantaged, and breaking that ceiling for them. And it's not about getting them to a board level. It's about getting them just a professional job that gives them a chance to do something different in life.
Yeah, this is the reason I'm passionate about this, because what you just outlined is exactly me. So I'm an Iranian immigrant, came here when I was 5. I went through horrible schooling, and when I was choosing my A-levels, I was in a horrific school. It was rated as one of the worst by Ofsted, and the sixth form closed down after I left. But while I was there, I was top student. I got the 3 A's, and I said to the sixth form advisor, I said, yeah, I've got the 3 A's. I want to apply to these sort of top 5 unis, or your typical top 5 in the UK. And the look on her face, she was like, oh, no, just because that environment, people, they're so risk averse, they don't know anything. Whereas in the end, I ended up going to a top 20 Russell group, but I had the grades to get into a top 5. And then later on, there was no guidance, basically. When you come from an immigrant family, there is no guidance. Fortunately, the uni was good enough for me to get into the corporate world, which then shaped my worldview and polished me up a little bit and gave me all the other skills, and then everything sort of followed on from there. So it's absolutely crucial, and that's why I think we've focused on this, Iman being first generation Iranian immigrants as well. How can we fix things though, generally?
I don't think anyone needs to do anything big. You don't need to do anything big, right? You just mentor one person, you're going to make a massive impact, because that one person changing their life is going to have a network effect on everyone around them. You don't need to have a big master plan, right? It starts small. If you can just find a group of people that you can help, and again, it doesn't need to be money, just time, advice, a shoulder, to them to cry on or to lean into. Just start small, and it will grow by itself, because it's something that people want. They really need it, and they will respond to it. So I don't think anything big needs to be planned here. It's just go out there, whether it's with an established charity, or whether it's you want to do it on your own, set up your own thing, or even just you notice someone. It could be someone lives near you, a friend, an acquaintance, a family member. It could be anyone. but just reach out and offer help to people. You'll be surprised how often people respond, positively to that.
I guess the challenge to that is then, this is an at-scale problem, right? Not everyone can go to a private school on a scholarship like you did.
Yeah.
How do you take that? Are you saying that the bottom-up approach of everyone doing their part can support that at-scale problem, or are there other methods that are more institutionalized that might be able to help?
Well, if your question is a kind of a societal question, I do not think it can be fixed bottom-up. No, I think, and I'm not going to go down anything like we need grammar schools or we need that. I actually think it's different things. We need places where kids can go, which are safe places, which are supervised, and there are good influences for them, like social centres. There were in every community a social centre where kids could go to, and there would be adults there that would, have a ping pong tournament for them or play a game of football in a playground, but it was supervised, and you made sure people were being influenced the right way, and just that interaction with an adult that wasn't their parents, if they have both parents, was a positive influence on them. That's the element I think we've lost. It's that, and that's what Making a Leap has. It has its own building, and it gets these kids and brings them in. And literally, we have people full time who go to job centres and look for kids who you can see them. They're lost in a job centre. They don't even know how to apply or find. They don't know what to do, and they literally go up to these kids and say, "Can I help?" And I think they think someone's trying to sell them something. No, this is a charity. We want to help you. And you see a lot of them are just scared to even. Why is a stranger talking to that? So I think it's a societal problem. I don't think we can fix it as a whole and eradicate it as individuals, but we can make it better. And so I don't want to wait for something to happen at that nationwide level. So I prefer to do what I can at a local level.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think that is the right approach people should have. It is fundamentally about people doing their part, and little things do make the big differences happen, I guess.
Absolutely.
Let's shift gears. We don't have much time left, so I just want to ask you some final questions.
Mm-hmm.
I guess to hopefully learn a little bit more about you.
Mm-hmm.
We ask this of loads of people, but
Okay.
First question is, what's your favorite book? If you have 3 top books, or even one, that have shaped your life view, your worldview, it doesn't have to be business stuff, but what are they?
I'm a massive science fiction fan. It's something my brother loved and was passed down to me. So I've always loved books like the Foundation series from Asimov. I've always loved Dune, Ender's Game from Orson Scott Card. I didn't really like the movie, but that was a book I always loved from childhood. So those kind of science fiction books have always inspired me, and I relate better to the future than I do to now when I read a book, because the now is a bit too I'm not sure I agree with that. That's really like that type of thing. So that kind of thing. And at the moment, I'm going through a phase. I'm trying to read Chinese science fiction. I'm finding that fascinating. There's a really good series called The Three Body Problem. It's by the most famous and celebrated Chinese science fiction author, and it's so different. And for me, I'm getting my science fiction fix, but I'm also getting an insight into, I guess, Chinese society, because you can just see the person who's written this has not come from the world that I grew up in, and their view of the world is so different. Not wrong, just so different. So for me, I'm a massive science fiction fan, the classics, but of the new ones I've read, I really like The Three Body Problem. If you haven't read.
Yeah, I'll have to order that. Who is your favorite entrepreneur and why? Dead or alive, all time?
I don't think I can pick one person, because unfortunately with modern society we're so quick to pick out any character flaws that anyone has that it tempers your view and say, yeah, but you remember when I did that 5 years ago? Or
I don't blame you. I don't blame you.
And I'm sure every entrepreneur from 50 years ago had the same issues, but we would never be aware of them. So I'm going to kind of cop out of this one and not give you one answer. There are entrepreneurs that frighten me in terms of how committed and how long a journey they went on. If you look at someone like Bezos and how long he ran that company without burning out. I can only admire him. I don't know how anyone could do that. And the scale of that business as well, the complexity. So something like that is just fascinating and daunting and scary to me. Someone like, I'll be honest, I'm not a fan of someone like Zuckerberg. I think he's doing it for the wrong reasons, and I don't think he thinks about things like social mobility or the better of society. And I'm not because he's a bad person. I just think his mindset is not something I can relate to. So I'm a fan of entrepreneurs who've built something and then gone out and done side projects as well, whether it's Blue Origin or SpaceX, whatever. That's the kind of entrepreneur I like when they've tried lots of different things and they've got a little bit of flaws, but not too crazy flaws.
Yeah, awesome. Great way to end. Amir, I've really enjoyed this conversation. Thanks so much for coming on. Where can people find you, contact you, or just, yeah?
I'm a LinkedIn man. Drop me a note on LinkedIn, and then I live my life on WhatsApp. So we become friends. We'll become WhatsApp friends. That's where. Although these days it's all about Telegram or Signal. All the Americans have gone to Signal. All the Europeans have gone to Telegram. There's a complete geographic split, I've noticed, with my friends, as well as everyone's on Clubhouse these days. But definitely, if you want to speak to me, just drop me a note on LinkedIn. I'm very responsive.
For sure. Awesome. Cool. Thank you so much, Amir.
No, thank you guys. I don't think there's any value in terms of what I said. So I apologize for rambling on for so long, but I enjoyed the chat and I've enjoyed listening to the other episodes you guys have done. So keep it up, guys. Really good work.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
No worries.
Thank you, Amir.
Bye.
Cheers.